What's up, y'all, and welcome to Week 5 Flex Friday. I'm here with Andy again. New week, new hotel, Andy. Where are you at this time?
See, we are in Natchez, Mississippi this week. So this is really a road show here. You know, taking it to the people, taking it on the road. Some great food in Natchez, actually. Haven't spent a whole lot of time in Mississippi. You know, being from Montana, never had a big interest going to a lot of places in the South. But Natchez, pretty cool place, actually. So
yeah, huge fantasy football town, from what I've heard. That's
yeah.
just like a note that goes around the community is that Natchez is just big for fantasy football.
You know, I've got, well, they do make an Andy Gator beer, so I figured I had to try it out, and pretty good. So I guess this is from Louisiana, but either way.
I love to see it, man.
Yeah.
I love to see it. So for you guys that haven't watched before, Andy and I are each going to give you some great flex plays for the week. We're also going to each give you a streaming quarterback and a streaming tight end. So stay tuned after the intro. Okay, man. So week 5, here we come. I'm actually kind of excited about some of my takes this week. So why don't you kick us off, Andy? Who's your first flex player of the week that is a must start?
Yeah, so, you know, you didn't draft this guy to be a flex. If it's your dynasty roster, you took him probably with the first overall pick in not this last draft, but the one previous, and that's Breece Hall. It's been a rough start to the season coming back from injury, but, you know, reports are that he is off of his reduced workload. He's fully good to go, and he's playing the team where he tore his ACL last week. Could be a little bit of a vengeance spot, but more importantly, Denver is 31st in rush DVOA, DVOA being defense value over the alternate or adjusted. So it just, you know, takes into consideration the matchups that other teams have had. So if a team's played a really good run team, then, you know, that factors in versus if they played, you know, a poor team. So really how good a team actually is. They're also allowing the most fantasy points to the running back position, which for fantasy, that's an even better stat almost. And even if you know, a lot of that comes from that Miami game, but even if you took away Achane's monster performance or Achane's monster performance, it'd still be in the bottom 3 fantasy points allowed to RBs. And that's taking away somebody who dropped over 50 points in a game. So, you know, also with his Jets team, you know, with Sean Payton saying all that stuff about Nathaniel Hackett, I think there's some bad blood on the Jets organization. I feel like they're going to be really fired up after that loss to the Chiefs last week. And, you know, Breece Hall's only had over 10 points in week 1. Every other week he's been under, sometimes way under, but my bold prediction is that he has a monster game this week and just goes off.
Yeah, and I think for me, the best part about that take is that Zach Wilson actually looked okay last week. Like, yeah. I was watching that game and I was like, okay, like if he can just run the offense like this, then yeah. I do actually think they could be a fringe playoff team with that defense. And if Breece Hall gets the wheels running.
Yeah, no, he played good. And I mean, also, you know, if they can just get up a little bit, I feel like they're just going to want to pound the rock too. And, you know, Breece Hall is a monster. You know, he hasn't shown it yet this year coming back from injury, but last year he was such a dominant force when he was healthy that he's going to have big games eventually.
Yeah, I saw this awesome stat last week that last week was the only time in Patrick Mahomes' career that he was out-dueled in every statistical category by the opposing quarterback. So interceptions, yards, touchdowns, you know, all of those things, which is pretty crazy that A, that's never happened to him, and B, Zach Wilson was the one to finally get through. So let's go, Zach. Yeah, let's go, Zach, and let's go Breece. And when you said the 1-1, I thought you were talking about Rashid Shaheed. But I guess we're not going there. So, you know, that would be next year's 1-1, not, you know, I just got
for overall, for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So My first flex play is someone that has been a little up and down this year, but I think this is going to be a great week for them, and that's going to be Zay Flowers at Pittsburgh. Wide receiver ones have just absolutely feasted against the Steelers. Adams had his 40-point week. Nico blew up last week. Ayuk had a monster week 1 against them. And Flowers is the number 1 guy in Baltimore, if we're not talking about Andrews, right? He's had multiple games with 10 targets. So I think he's a very good upside play. It could be tough for there to be consistency in that Ravens passing attack. But he is the number 1. Bateman's been completely invisible. Odell may play. He may not play. I think really the biggest thing for the Ravens passing game is just Lamar running the touchdowns in really does limit some of that upside just because, touchdowns do create some of those monster weeks. But Flowers is a great player, and let's not forget that rookies are going to slowly progress. This is going to be a pattern with another guy I'm going to bring up here in a little bit, is that rookies will be getting better. We should not expect them to be them final selves week 2, week 3, week 4. So moving forward, you almost have to do some slight projecting, I think.
No, I mean, and that's really how you win fantasy matchups is you don't just go off of, the projected points there. It's you've got to determine who's going to break out before they do and what the good matchups are. And yeah, I like this call. I think, the only tough part is it being a division game. I feel like the Steelers are going to get up for this, but Zay Flowers has a talent that if, he's going to have those big games, and Steelers matchup is still great, even though it's going to be a tough, divisional.
And I would almost hope that it will be closer. Sometimes you get those games where when they're not close, then you're just you get up 14 and they start just running some really basic offense. So I'm hoping for a close game, and the over under, not all flex plays have to be over under based as well. So no. Andy, why don't you kick us off with your next guy?
All right. Well, the next one, it's kind of a dual stack here. And, you might say it's kind of a homer play repping this, but I think Romeo, Doubs, and Christian Watson are both great plays this week. The Raiders are 30th DVOA versus wide receivers. Green Bay played last Thursday. They got their asses absolutely kicked in that game, especially in the first half. I feel like they're going to come out mean. Watson is finally practicing in full, but almost more importantly, Elgin Jenkins, their Pro Bowl, he plays tackle, he plays guard, he's played center. He's going to be healthy and he's going to be back there. So their pass protection is going to be a lot better than it was on Thursday. Besides Bakhtiari, he's by far their best offensive lineman. So not Zach Wilson. Wow. Jordan Love should have a lot more time to pass. Doubs had 13 targets the last game. He still had 9 receptions. And it's a 45 point over under, kind of right in the middle of the grouping right there. And, I think this is going to be, a game where the Packers are still going to be throwing it a lot. Their defense has still been struggling. And I think both these guys have a real great opportunity against this Raiders secondary that has only gotten 1 interception on the season. And the way to beat them is throwing the ball.
Yeah, I like that. If you had to choose between the two, let's say you owned both of them, is it Watson just because of preseason hype, or do you think Doubs might be the guy or he's shown?
I mean, I think Watson is always available for those huge plays. I think Doubs is, and I said this before the season starts, so I remember texting you about this. I think Doubs is going to lead the team in targets this year. I smashed his receiving total over, and that's barring injury. That's looking great so far. So I think Doubs is in some ways a safer play, but I think Watson is by far a bigger upside play because with his speed and his size, and they are always looking for him in the red zone too. I mean, he could hit a 40, 50-yard touchdown, and then sweet, that's great for your flex play, even if he doesn't catch another ball.
Yeah, he was wide open for his touchdown last week. It was just a completely blown coverage, but they diagnosed and diagrammed that play for him. That really is what you want with your players in the red zone. So I think it's a good call. I'm very positive about a lot of these young Green Bay weapons, and I'm excited to see if Love can progress, what can happen. So my next guy, I'm going to go to the backfield. I'm going to go Dameon Pierce at Atlanta. This is another one similar to the Breece Hall one where it's we drafted this guy to be a starter, but I mean, I benched him last week because he had looked a little bad and he was kind of tough to feel. But I think last week he looked really good for Pierce. I think he looked explosive. And the fact that the Texans are progressing as a team is very good just game script wise, because they're either going to be in the game or they might even be ahead like they were last week. And against Atlanta, like, I don't really see Atlanta jumping out to a lead. Like, yeah, it could be a neck and neck game if they play well, they have a good defense, but they're not going to drop 35 on you and have you just doing like Blake Bortles garbage time. So I'd expect another 15 plus touches from Pierce. He's the goal line guy, and he always has a chance to score. And he's been involved in the pass game more than I think people have really noticed, just because their game scripts haven't been the greatest for him as well. So I think this is a great week to play Pierce, especially if you're looking for a very good floor play. I think Flowers would be a ceiling guy. I think Pierce is a great floor play to just get the points.
No, yeah, I mainly agree with that. I mean, the Falcons are coming back from London too. They didn't take the bye week, so that's always kind of an adjustment to get back on your schedule. And I mean, I like this Texans team. I mean, CJ Stroud is looking like the real deal. And I mean, I've got a Texan coming up here too that I'm going to talk about. So we might have to make a little bet on who scores the most points between our two guys. But yeah, no, I don't mind it.
I love it. So let's just move on to your next guy.
Well, that Texan is none other than rookie Tank Dell. Now, he only had 3 targets and 1 catch last week, but totally dominating the game. I mean, they were up, and, you know, if Nico Collins just scores a touchdown, that means that nobody else can score a touchdown for that drive. So it makes it tough. But, you know, Wood's snap share is slowly going down. Like we said with Zay Flowers, these rookies are only going to get more opportunities. CJ Stroud looks good, and Falcons are the 31st best team DVOA versus the pass. And they're also very bad, especially against wide receiver 2s and wide receiver 3s. So if Nico Collins is the one here, I think that's going to open up a lot of opportunities for the other guys. And I think Tank Dell is just, you know, at this point in Robert Woods' career, Tank Dell is the more explosive, exciting player. And yeah, I think this is just, you know, a matchup that just looks bad for the Falcons coming back. So,
yeah, I mean, if we want to use last week as an example, I mean, Ridley did get a blown coverage play, but in general, AJ Terrell mostly just followed Ridley around. And that's exactly what you're saying. If AJ Terrell is on your number one guy, which is Nico Collins, just from a game plan standpoint, that hopefully should leave some room for Tank Dell to operate. And hopefully he makes a big play. He's a ceiling guy. He's in that exact category, like you were saying. Like, he totally has a 3-catch game within his realm of possibility, but he also has 120 and a touchdown or 2.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move on to my next guy. And I mean, honestly, all of these guys we've been talking about, this is kind of what your flex decision is on a weekly basis, right? It's, are you going for something safe, or are you going with an upside play? So I'm going upside of all the upside plays. Last week's darling, Michael Wilson versus Cincinnati. I am buying in. I love this guy in the offseason, so maybe I'm just a little biased. But 44 over under. The thing that I really like about Wilson is that he's increased his fantasy points every game, right? 3.9, 8.6, 10.6, 26.6 last week with the 2 scores. Now, I'm not saying 26.6 is going to be his weekly output, but the fact that it is within the realm of possibility this early on in his career is a great thing. Very similar to the Tank Dell idea, is like the fact that he has the ability to break for 100 and a couple touchdowns puts him in a category that about half the league just has literally no chance to do that. Like, you are not playing Allen Robinson being like, dude, he's going to get me 120 and 2 touchdowns. You're like, I hope he doesn't limp off the field. So, you know, with that being said, I think he's going to be a part of the game plan. And I just think Cincinnati's offense is going to be a little better next week. Arizona has a pretty good defense, but they haven't been great against the pass. So I think the combination of the two, this game could just have some points in it. And I just think Wilson is a good play if you're looking for some ceiling. You know, obviously he's not a safe play. Hollywood's still probably the number one there, but I think I'd feel comfortable plugging him in if you have some bye week fill-ins.
No, I think this is a good call. I mean, the Bengals have definitely looked off this year with, you know, Joe Burrow struggling to get back from that calf injury. Their defense hasn't quite looked the same either. And, there's so much hype with Michael Wilson in preseason coming from the Cardinals, which, preseason hype, it's always, you got to take it with a grain of salt, but it was a pretty consistent drumbeat from them for how much they loved him. And, he's finally showing that he can be that guy. So,
well, my favorite thing about Wilson too is that he at least he's on his own in that Arizona offense where like Hollywood, George, Rondell, they are all literally smaller than me height-wise. Where like Michael Wilson is the big guy on that offense. So he kind of has that, flanker role. So I think he's a good play. Let's move on to tight ends and QBs. Andy, who are going to be your streamers this week? Why don't you kick us off with whatever position you would like to start with?
So I'm going to go to tight end. I'm going to go back to that Cardinals offense. I did not think when the season started that, I would want players on this Cardinals offense, but tight end, man, it's Zach Ertz. The Bengals are 31st in DVOA versus the tight end. That's an area where they've really struggled against. They're allowing the 4th most fantasy points to that position. And Zach Ertz has the 2nd most targets out of any tight end in the NFL. Only TJ Hawkinson has more targets than him right now, which is mind-blowing. He hasn't scored a touchdown yet, but, even if he doesn't, this is a very safe play if you're struggling with bye weeks. And if he ever does get that touchdown, then awesome. He's probably 10 targets, 6 receptions, and a touchdown, and that's an amazing week from your tight end. He's still tight end 12 on the year. He's a top 12 tight end with no touchdowns. And, it's for the Bengals too. It's kind of a must-win game, but it's also a weird non-conference road game against the team where I feel like going into the season, they totally expected to beat. So yeah, I think, I still think the Bengals will probably win, but this Cardinals team has proven that they're going to put up a fight and they're willing to throw that ball with Josh Doubs.
Yeah. I mean, I saw something the other day and it was joking, but like, I understand where they were going with this. And they're like, is Josh Dobbs this season's Geno Smith? And it's like, it's kind of stupid, but you're like, I mean, he doesn't look like that. Like, are there 32 quarterbacks better than Josh Dobbs? I don't think there are. No. And, there is some logic with that. Like, just like you said, this offense is at least not pathetic. I don't know if pathetic's the word, but like, it's an offense. Like, they're making plays. It's producing. James Conner, Ertz is a top 12 guy. Michael Wilson had a game. Hollywood's looked good. So just like you said, if you're looking for a guy where you want to turn the TV on and you're at least like, hey, that's my tight end catching the ball. Like, instead of playing some other guy where you're watching the Giants game and you're like, dude, where is Darren Waller? Like, he's not even on the field or he's not even like being thrown the ball. That's kind of like what you're saying is like, those are your two schools of thought tight end wise, and Ertz is the safe option.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go a similar play kind of to Ertz in that same neighborhood. I'm going to go Ferguson against San Fran. 45 over under. It is a hard matchup, but Ferguson sneakily has 7 targets in back-to-back games, and he has 7 targets in 3 out of the 4 games this season as well, which for how terrible tight end is, I think that's an incredible stat for him. 77 yards last week. He's involved in the red zone. And basically, I don't think we need to overthink this one. He's picked up right where Dalton Schultz left off. Dalton Schultz is a good system player, and Ferguson seems to have just slid right into that system as a check down guy. Last week he had 7 for 7 and 77 yards, 11 yards a catch. Just check it down to him. Maybe he'll score, maybe he won't. But like you said, he's involved in the offense, and that's something that you can at least hang your hat on for a streaming tight end.
Yeah, I think that's what you got to look for is just opportunities. I mean, it is a tough matchup going up against the 49ers, but, the Cowboys are still going to be with their offense too. I feel like they're still going to be throwing the ball, and, he might be the, 2-3 target on this team with, him and Pollard going back and forth. And if you're streaming a tight end, I think that's the place to do it.
I mean, I personally am, and I think this is a situation a lot of people are going to be in. I personally am playing him over Dallas Goedert this week in a league. I think at this point, now I didn't drop Goedert. I think this is a key that if I am suggesting advice to someone, if you have Darren Waller, Goedert, Kittle, these kind of guys that have kind of been letting you down, I don't think I would drop them. But I understand the logic between being like, I'm going to play someone else until I trust being able to start someone else. And I'm just kind of sick of seeing the downside of Goddard specifically, where if that offense isn't humming like it has been, he's just third on the peg. And Swift looks better than Miles Sanders. So I don't need to get into a Dallas Goddard argument here. But Jake Ferguson.
I like Goddard this week, man. I almost picked him as my guy.
Jake Ferguson, roll him up there. Andy, who are we playing at QB?
Well, I'm at QB. I'm going to stick my Green Bay Packers. I talked about why the Raiders are a great matchup for wide receivers. Usually means they're also a great matchup for quarterback, and they are. They're, 28th best DVOA versus the pass. They've been allowing over 20 points per game to quarterbacks. Packers coming off the long rest, better line protection, and the Packers D also struggling. I feel like this could be a high scoring game. The Raiders are okay against the run. Aaron Jones is still getting back to being healthy. AJ Dillon does not come alive until December. And I think this is a game where Love is going to throw the ball to those receiving options.
I thought you were going to almost do a second tight end and go back to Musgrave. And I was like, I respect it, man. I do think Musgrave, but yeah, I think it's a great matchup. Jordan Love, like you said, he's gotten points. Sometimes we have to think that this is fantasy football and it's not regular football, right? So even when he's looked bad NFL wise, he's gotten down and then he's brought his team back and he's scored fantasy points. So that works. Those count just the same.
Yeah. And as somebody too, I don't know if you've ever watched the QB School. I can't remember his name right now, but he does awesome breakdowns of quarterback play. I've watched every single one on Jordan Love, and he definitely makes some mistakes, but he's doing a lot of things right too. And I think this is a defense where if you take a guy who might be a little bit erratic, still young in the league, and you put him against a terrible defense, that's the matchup that you want to play him in.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm going to go out on a limb here for my QB, and I could totally regret saying this. And I even typed this in my notes. I didn't even write his name. I typed Danny Mofo Dimes because I am just, I have had Daniel Jones's back for so many years. And I feel so bad for the guy watching that game on Monday night because it really wouldn't have mattered who the quarterback was. You would be getting smoked with that kind of awesome offensive line production. And through all of that, if you take away the turnovers, yes, I know taking away the turnovers, that he had them. I'm not saying that he's not ever going to have turnovers. But on average, he's not going to have 3 turnovers a game. Without scoring a touchdown, if you take away the turnovers, he would have had 15 fantasy points. That is a crazy high floor. And it's just really the rushing production that he has because, he's had over 40 rushing yards in 3 out of 4 games, which is just such a higher floor than people are giving him credit for. As bad as he has looked NFL-wise, he was a QB2 last week. He wasn't QB2. He was a QB2. But other people's bad weeks get worse than that. And I just think in this matchup, I think he's going to bounce back a little, at least fantasy-wise. And I think he's going to get you more rushing yards. They're going to have to score points against Miami. So I'm just hoping, putting it out there, that I think this is the week. And the best positive about Danny Dimes is that he is one of the few quarterback twos that has the ability to drop 30 to 40 points. He can do it. Most quarterback twos really give you that Sam Howell, Kenny Pickett, Jimmy G, whatever, where it's like, yeah, they can get you 18. But,
yeah, as long as he doesn't trip on a 70-yard touchdown run, I mean, he's with his legs and how much he's going to be running. Like you said, that floor is there. And yeah, they're going to have to score points against this Miami team because that offense is humming like crazy.
So what is your game of the week?
So my game, I mean, I already talked about, the Packers in this one. I think that Packers-Raiders game, it's obviously you're playing Devontae Adams, but, it's a little bit of a revenge spot, even though I think it's still pretty good blood between him and the Packers. But I still like Jacoby Myers here. The Packers have really struggled against, wide receivers and wide receiver twos. And if Jair's back, then, there's probably going to be shifting a lot of coverage to Adams. I think he's got opportunities. Josh Jacobs is still an auto start, but, I think he's going to have a great time against this Packers run D that's really struggled. Shout out Joe Barry, Packers defensive coordinator. And I love all the receiving weapons and Jordan Love on this Packers team. So I'm hoping it's either a real exciting Monday night game where it's back and forth, or as a Packers fan, I'd be very happy with like a 35-10 blowout. But I have a feeling I'm going to be a little bit stressed.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that's a good game to target. I think, the fact that you had a couple guys in that game earlier, this is kind of a pattern. It's very similar. The game I'm going with is Arizona versus Cincinnati. We both targeted guys in that game as well. Why? Because there's a lot of things that overlap. When you're looking for good flex plays, you're looking for other factors coming in besides them just being a stud. Because if they were a stud, you wouldn't have to ask people if you're playing them in your flex. You would just be starting them. Yeah. So I think AZ Cincinnati, kind of like I was saying earlier, I think Cincinnati is going to get slightly more on track. I don't think they're fully there, but Burrow's going to get healthier each week.
Yeah.
Arizona looks better than we thought on offense, so I think they can at least keep up. This wasn't a huge over-under. It was 44. But I think, 44 points between these two teams could definitely lead to some of these points going to only a few people, because looks like T. Higgins may be out. So maybe Tyler Boyd becomes playable. Mixon can score. I'm not playing a tight end for Cincy. So
no, I wouldn't do that. But yeah, I think we gotta throw a little bet here. I'm gonna take Tank Dell and Dallas Goedert if you want to roll with Ferguson and Dameon Pierce. I think whoever
can we throw Danny Dimes and Jordan Love? Can we? Yes. Can we 3-stack it?
Yes, let's 3-stack it. And whichever little squad of three has the most points, the other person has to mail the other person a beer.
Mail. Okay. So I'm mailing you a beer.
You can be FedExing me that thing.
It may or may not. It may or may not be a Smirnoff Ice, but even so, I think that's a good bet. I think this may be something we got to keep going week to week, as we pick three guys and we stack them against each other. So
that sounds fun.
Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to keep track of our bet. We will come back next week and we'll see how it does. But Andy, any last notes before we let everyone go?
Yeah, I'm just looking forward to drinking an ice cold beer that you send me up in Canada next week. I've got
international, dude. I can't.
Going international, man. We're going international. It's been crazy. Start of November, I'm finally going to be home for like a week and a half, 2 weeks straight. And I am honestly pretty excited about that fact.
Can you even ship beers international? Is that a thing?
I don't know. I mean, we might just have to wait. And you'll have to.
I'll drive it up. I'll drive the border, man.
There we go.
I got a 2007 instead of a 2001 now, so I can make the trip as long as I go around Colorado. That's where I got stuck last time. So.
Oh, yeah, dude. Come up to the Great White North.
But yeah, thank you guys for tuning in, and we will catch you next week, and we'll let you know the outcome of our beer bet. So see ya.